All right, so today's topic is hacking the speed of GRC. I know all CISOs would love to just walk in day one and be handed a sheet that says, here's what our risks are, here are our most important assets, here's what we're most concerned of, ranked from top to bottom, here you go. That never happens, does it?
No. I have to go and create the risk register most places I join, and then start calling out the fact that if you don't have one, you're in trouble from a compliance and regulatory point of view.
What is my impact to the business, right? If this asset that's a critical value gets hit, what's the likelihood and what's the impact?
We did a couple of podcast episodes where we talked about governance leading the discussion, risk leading discussion. Nobody said compliance should lead the discussion as of yet.
Create something that is not a spreadsheet. Because if you're going to do this in spreadsheet hell, you're going to hinder your ability to get to that next level.
Let me throw out a question that we received from Eli Migdal in Tel Aviv. He's with Borders. He asks, who should set the value of an asset and determine which asset is critical?
It depends on the organization, really, right? I mean, depending on how the organization's set up, your ISMS or your risk board, being able to put a value on something is obviously a classification process that needs to happen and go through, right?
If you don't have an external regulatory body, then there's a lot of teeth that you don't have, right? You have to gum your developers to death, to get them to do things. Legacy can be very insulting and very pejorative term, right? And you may be talking to the person that wrote, call it a heritage application, because it was the right application stack for the time. And so calling it legacy and calling it technical debt can oftentimes just engender, a bad attitude and energy around something.
What did you learn were in this overwhelming, laborious process? What were the things that were becoming the biggest hangups for people?
When I come into a small startup, I had very minimal resources. So obviously being able to automate, pull us out of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are probably the worst thing you can do with a GRC program.
Rick Woodward asked a pretty good question here. Should we stop talking about risk as a monolithic idea and split into risk by type, like availability, confidentiality, and integrity, or some other schema?
So yeah, risk is a fairly overloaded or generic term if you're going to use it in very precise ways. And so I think that it could stand to be expanded upon or even abandoned.
How do you start the GRC discussion with your business partners? So how does that begin? And I'll tell you this, his second part of this question is kind of the one that I hear is kind of the world's biggest hang up, is getting consensus.
The basics of getting people to care is actually good storytelling. So let's say you're talking to the executive team. You have to actually take them on an emotional journey where they feel the pain and they dip, and then they come out, and then there's this moment of like, aha, and we brought in a GRC tool to help with this.
I want to quote Tracy Van Giel here, who said, why does it feel like everyone's bad ideas have already been tried somewhere? This is a bad idea that comes from Ian Pointer, and he suggests let your general counsel run the risk register. Why would you want to do that?
Well, lawyers definitely understand risk usually, from what
They live in risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Roth had this bad idea. Tie your budget to your vulnerability score. So the more vulnerabilities, you get more budget to fix them. And then Dutch suggested the reverse of that bad idea. No, more vulnerabilities, you get less budget.
Let me play devil's advocate here then. So you want to basically give an end of year bonus to the person that submitted the most buggy code, right?
So suggesting Dutch is opposite, that the less vulnerabilities, you get more budget. So you are rewarded for less vulnerabilities.
AKA doing less work. So everyone's just sitting around twiddling their thumbs doing nothing because then they get it.
I remember back to a time where when I worked directly in the software industry, and we were measuring essentially individuals' output based on the lines of code they did, which is crazy, right? But some of it was terrible, right? And so if you,
by the way, the best code is the most efficiently written code.
Exactly. So the metric is completely wrong. Make it competitive, right? And there's an advantage to the team who has the least, right? And then use GRC and security as a resource that you pull in to teach your devs to do better quality.
Bob Henderson asks a really good question here. Has measuring risk itself become a risk? Since it's arbitrary, depending on who defines a risk, wouldn't the solutions be arbitrary?
We're in the business of helping quantify how much we want to invest in reaching a residual level of risk that the business is okay to sign off on, right? If the residual risk of your system is not an accurate reflection, you've hidden risk. You've buried it, right? You asked the wrong person. Someone checked the box and says, we resolve the risk that's on the register.
Thank you, everybody, for participating in our CISO series video chat. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.